Hi all, it's Lacey. I wanted to make a quick NearPod video to support folks in online lesson delivery, not only while we're fully remote, but also as we move into a hybrid model. We're not certain when that will happen, but we know that we need to be prepared. So I'm gonna just kind of set you up to see that I've split my screen. On the left-hand side, you'll see my NearPod account as an educator. We will all have gold accounts at some point. Right now, I'm working off of a free account. On the right-hand side, you'll see my NearPod screen as a student. I'm going to open up a new session of my NearPod lesson on NearPod. And I'm going to present this as a presenter-paced NearPod, which means that the student screen will change as my screen changes. I could also set this up to be a student-paced NearPod presentation. You'll notice that there are specific checkpoints for understanding, for participation. I'm going to change my name because I like the name Joe Schmo. Sorry, Joe. I'm going to change my name. And as an educator, as a facilitator or presenter, here you can see on the left-hand side is my screen. So today we're going to focus on engaging learners with NearPod. You'll notice that as I switch my screen on the left-hand side, the student screen changes on the right-hand side. And on the student side right now, I'm going to ask the students, what is your familiarity with NearPod? Over here, as an educator, I would be able to see not only the prompt, the question options, the student names, and Joe isn't very familiar with NearPod. He's like, what's a NearPod? Or maybe he's like, oh, I heard about that thing in a board meeting for the first time. Or Lacey dropped that proper noun in a staff meeting and acted like I was supposed to know what she was talking about. Well, I'm going to choose that as a student and submit my answer. Got it. My answer has been submitted. As the presenter, I can see that Joe has submitted his response. And when I have an adequate number of responses, I can continue on. So what is NearPod? What might we be able to embed in NearPod? We can embed content for students to interact with. Notice that there are labs, so PhET simulations for science teachers. Notice that we can import slides. You could import a PDF for a student to read. You could take students on a virtual field trip or embed a video. I'll show you that video embedded feature at the end. Images, websites, etc. You can also ask students to do certain things. So you can ask students to draw on your PDF. You can ask an open-ended question, provide a quiz, ask students to play a game, etc. So for example, I could ask students to draw a picture. I could imagine using this in a math class or in some sort of science class, or maybe I just want to do an SEL. Like I want to draw a picture to show how I'm feeling today. And this I actually put a timer on. So here's my picture. I'm going to add a little, I don't know, I'm feeling very loving today because Valentine's Day decorations are still up. My children won't let me put up any St. Patrick's Day information. And now I'm going to submit. Notice on the teacher side, Joe Schmo has submitted his, right? And I actually could have seen his progress as it was being created. Right now, if I had multiple students in my class, I would be able to view on a grid view their submissions. And notice the timer is still counting down. So I'm going to continue on. And we're going to set some objectives today, although we may not discuss as much of this common instructional model. I do, we do, you do, though that's helpful language to use when we're thinking about engaging students. We're also going to identify some tools in NearPod that could help us, not only in content delivery, but also in assessing student learning outcomes and engagement all the way throughout. I'm going to refer back to this model throughout our conversation today. Sometimes this is a helpful way of thinking about how I'm going to spend instructional minutes. If I only have 50 minutes with a student and I only have 20 minutes with that student, 50 minutes twice a week, I have 100 minutes total with students. I need to be really intentional about how I spend those minutes. So I'm thinking about an opening and then some direct student or teacher directed instruction, as well as some guided practice with feedback and independent practice, as well as a closing to kind of complete that cycle of learning. That can be incredibly helpful in my intentional planning for student learning. So right now, I wanted to show another example of a quiz or a student checkpoint. So this is a quick question that I've provided, and I believe that the best instructional model is not opening, I do, we do, you do, closing, but instead it's lecture, quiz, test, repeat. No, I like mine. I can't even make myself do it. Just because I know that this top one is very teacher-centered, and that's cool if that was something that you were successful in, but we know and research shows that students actually need something different. So you can look up gradual release of responsibility, you can look up scaffolding, you can look up all kinds of educational jargon that shows that student-centered classrooms promote higher levels of learning. But I'm just going to say opening, I do, we do, you do, closing is a pretty effective instructional model, right? So I can see right here that Joe Smo got that correct. So let's talk about what could happen in an opening aside from connecting to prior lessons or setting the objective. Right now, I might ask my participants to share with me some of their, I'm hoping that this is using my, my participants might share with me some of their opening routines. And some opening routines that I've used with my learners is to rate their understanding on an upcoming target or objective so that they can be reflective on their own learning. Or maybe I just want to do a social and emotional learning check-in. I'm also going to say this is kind of cool. In these open responses, I could ask students to record audio. So let's try that out. What would that look like as a student? Here is my recorded audio. And when I'm done, I can stop recording and probably preview, which I'm not going to do right now. But now I've submitted my answer, and over here on the left-hand side, I'll be able to see that Joe has provided an answer and has also spoken his answer. I can imagine that would be very helpful in, let's say, a math class. You want them to not only type their answer, but also explain their mathematical thinking using academic vocabulary, right? So we move on to the idea of I do. This is really the teacher-led part, teacher modeling, visual demonstration. This might be where you're showing a video or you are guiding students through some note-taking. While you're doing that, imagine asking students to respond with a kind of a close reading activity. So images promote student understanding. Here's an example of this type of response. Clear learning targets will promote student success. Provide examples of exemplary work, right? Give students time to talk through their learning. Provide notes ahead of time so that students' cognitive load is not focused on copying down everything you're saying, but instead is focused on understanding and annotating those notes perhaps. We might ask guiding questions. We could create some collaborative learning tasks, especially during this time that could be very isolating. Encourage students to try again. Make learning visible with graphic organizers. Emphasize academic vocabulary. Maybe you pre-teach that. Maybe you front-load some of those academic vocabulary terms, especially because even in biology, we're all English language learners, right? So you can see how many answers I got correct. As as a presenter, I can see that Joe's well on his way. What about we do? So this part, I know a lot of us are using collaborative tools in Google in the G Suites for Education. Maybe you're using Jamboard or maybe you're using Google Docs. Notice that we've kind of talked about this open response. We've talked about polling. You could also use this kind of collaborative board. It's very similar to Jamboard. These are just examples from Mr. Q's health class, which you'll be able to see at the end of this. So here's a collaborative board waiting for teacher input. The teacher on my teacher side, it says this slide is a collaborate board. Would you like to approve student comments before they are posted? That's an interesting question because maybe I say yes. And I notice that my students' thoughts are very on point, right? And I can approve that right over here, right? So as a teacher, this is pending approval. And look right here, I can see that I need to say, oh yeah, Joe's right, he's on point. Or maybe maybe I've have something that is kind of disrespectful. Or maybe it's not helpful, or maybe this is that student who doesn't participate but tries to like hold hostage our learning opportunities. I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to, right? But maybe I realize that I don't really need that tool anymore. I believe I can change my settings. I wish that I could change it right now, and I think that I can, but I'm not going to waste any of our time. I know that I can change my settings so that they don't have to be moderated. If you already have a really positive classroom culture and you are already using a lot of these collaborative tools, I promise you the students are far less likely to disrupt the learning than we often give them credit for. What about you do? What about independent practice or assessment or student independent application of learning or reflecting on their learning? What about learning logs? Those types of things. So there's lots of ways to incorporate that, not only in NearPod, but also with other apps like Flipgrid. So something that can be incorporated into Flipgrid into NearPod is Flipgrid, where students can join with Google. I'm going to just click on join with Google. I'm going to sign in with my student information. I'm hoping that this takes me to a response board. It does. Let me move my face out of the way. And one of the things that I wanted to do is record a response. I wanted to record a shout out to a colleague because that's what the prompt says. So let's see how this works. And this is a little unnerving. I'm going to allow NearPod to use my camera. Oh dear. I'm actually going to go to options and I'm going to say mic only. Notice I could upload a clip. I could make it so that I can see myself. I could mirror my video. I could record my screen. If I wanted to include myself, so here I am, I could include a filter. Your students will love to play around with this, and it promotes student voice. It even gives you the opportunity to hear your kids that you don't always hear from. So consider that. Another option is, another component to think about is how might we close out our lessons, right? So it's always helpful to celebrate growth, revisit learning objectives, identify next steps, evaluate how effective our lesson might have been, provide homework, right? So here's an example of homework where we can connect what we've learned using ordered pairs or pairs, right? So an example of I do would be teacher-led demonstration or modeling. Oh, Really? Oh, it's because I use the same thing. So let's try this again. An example of I do might be direct instruction. I did this wrong because notice I have I do on there twice. So I bet this one connects with this one. We just learned something, y'all. We probably shouldn't use the same terms over and over again. So let's try this. Opening. Opening might be reviewing the learning targets for the day. Oh, opening might be connecting the day's learning to prior lessons. Yay! Notice over here, this is just a game, right? And you get to see how many times I tried it and how many matches I had. Let's keep on going. Notice here, because I've decided to play this video, to embed a video in my NearPod presentation, I have a choice. I can either play this video for students, or I can have students play the video at their own pace. Students to play the video at their own pace. When I click on continue, this is a quick video, 3.5 minutes, and to
like that comes to your mind, but you guys have to type that in right there.
I've got a multiple choice question embedded. Later on, I have I'm going to let you play around with this a little bit more. I just wanted you to see some of the resources that are available in NearPod about your instructional planning, your assessment of learning. And remember, we're all here to help you. Ask members of your collaborative team. They are the experts. Lots of folks have been using this. And if you need additional support, you can always come to drop-in coaching in the lecture hall on Mondays and Thursdays from 1 to 2, or reach out to myself, Tamra, Rose, or any of the members of our EdTech team. We've got each other's backs, y'all. Good luck.